Okay, so what we had looked at was changing the period of sine and cosine, right? By default, the period of sine and cosine has a period of 360 degrees. So what we can do is we can change it, and here's the formula for period. Period is equal to 360 degrees divided by b. So what is b? B is this number here, which tells us about our horizontal stretch or compression. Okay, so in this graph here, f of x equals sine of 3x, our b is 3. And for here, f of x equals sine of 1/2 x, our b is 1/2. And so basically all we do is we plug into this formula and we find the period. So we know for this first graph here that the period is equal to 360 divided by 3, and 360 divided by 3 is 120. So the period equals 120 degrees. So you can't actually see this here, but notice that it's going 3 times as fast. My x-axis is in radians, so you don't quite see 120 there. But notice that, okay, if this is one period of the black graph, which is the regular sine wave, notice that I have 3 periods of the red wave, which is sine of 3x in there, right? And so 360 divided by 3 is 120. So that's how you figure out what the period is. Similarly, we have stretched out this one graph down here, f of x equals sine of 1/2 x, right? It's taking twice as long for our red graph to complete one cycle. Alright, so we need to figure out what the period is here. So we know that the period is equal to 360 over 1/2, and we know that that's equal to 360 times 2 over 1, which is 720. And that makes sense, right? Because this 1/2 says we're moving half as fast, it's taking us twice as long to complete one cycle of sine, and twice as long as 360 is 720. Okay, now we want to work backwards. What happens if I ask you, what is b when the period is 120? Because many times, especially if we have word problems, we are given a period and we need to come up with an equation. So the one thing we have to solve for is b. So again, we deal with our equation. Period is equal to 360 over b. And so now this is our period, so we plug that in here. So we have 160 is equal to 120 is equal to 360 over b. And so I cross multiply, and so I get that b is 360 over 120, which is 3. And actually that makes sense because here in the first problem, I gave you sine of 3x and we determined that our period was 120. Using the same formula but in a different way, here I'm given that the period is 120 and my b is 3. Okay, so let's try a problem completely from scratch here, and I want to graph f of x equals negative 3 cosine 2x minus 1. So remember that by default, cosine looks like this, right? It starts high and it ends high. So this is y equals cosine x. Let me do this in red, what I want. Remember, so that means that negative cosine x, y equals negative cosine x, is upside down, and it looks like a mountain. Okay? So let's take a look. Here we're asked to graph f of x equals negative 3 cosine 2x minus 1. Is this thing vertically flipped? Yes, I have a minus sign out in front. My amplitude, that's my vertical stretch, is 3. Now the period I actually have to solve for, right? The period is what you see in the picture. It's not b, right? This 2 is b. So remember my formula is that period is equal to 360 over b, but I know that in this case b in my equation is 2, so that means that my period is equal to 180 degrees. My midline is a vertical shift, and that says it's down 2, so that's the line y equals negative 1. So I'm going to go ahead and graph that first so we have an idea of where the midline of my graph is. And my period is now 180, so this is where I'm going to complete one cycle. And as before, I go ahead and I divide by 2. 180 divided by 2 is 90. 90 divided by 2 is 45. And then in here is 135. Okay? I need that for my graph. And I know my thing is vertically flipped. So my graph is going to follow this pattern here. So My amplitude is 3, so from the midline I go down 3. Okay. I cross through my midline. Instead of 0, I cross through my midline, and then back up to positive 2, right? Because I'm shifted down 1 with an amplitude of 3, so negative 1 plus 3 is 2. Then at 145, I come back through my midline, and then go all the way down. Oops, that's actually not how it goes. Let me erase. My graph ends at 180. So I need to come down to here. And that is one cycle of negative 3 cosine 2x minus 1. But the big thing is, in order to find this period here, you need to use this formula. Okay? So you don't actually see b, but you see the period. Alright, and of course, here's your homework video problem number 2. So part A is to find the period of f of x equals 4 cosine 5x. So do the calculation to find the period. And then for part B, what is b if the period of a cosine function, or it could be sine, is 720 degrees. So show your work, do your calculations, and I'll see you tomorrow.